My name is Miranda. I'm 28 years old, and I'm standing outside my childhood home this Thanksgiving morning with a briefcase that's about to change everything. 1 year ago at this very table, my parents looked at me and said those words that cut deeper than any knife ever could. Some kids make you proud. Others just take up space. Everyone laughed. My successful siblings, my aunts, my uncles, even my cousins. Today, I'm here to show them exactly how much space I've been taking up. Before we dive into my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Are you spending time with family this season? Please hit that like button if you've ever felt like the black sheep in your family, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss what happens next. Trust me, you'll want to see how this family dinner turns out when the one they called worthless walks in holding all the cards. Let me paint you a picture of the Sterling family where success isn't just expected, it's demanded. My father, Robert, is an investment banker at one of the top firms in Manhattan, the kind of man who checks stock prices during his own mother's funeral. My mother, Catherine, is a renowned cardiac surgeon who saves lives by day and destroys her children's self-esteem by night. Together, they built what they call their empire of excellence, and they had 3 children to carry on their legacy. First came my brother Ethan, now 31, with his Harvard MBA hanging in his corner office at Goldman Sachs. He's everything our parents wanted in a son, ruthless, calculating, and willing to step on anyone to climb higher. Then there's Lauren, 26, currently at Stanford Medical School and engaged to the son of a state senator. She learned early that beauty and brains could be weaponized, and she's been using both against me since we were kids. And then there's me, Miranda, the community college dropout, the one who works at a nonprofit helping homeless veterans, the one who lives in a studio apartment instead of a penthouse. The perpetual disappointment in the Sterling family portrait. Last Thanksgiving started like every other family gathering. The mahogany dining table was set with grandmother's china, the one that only comes out when we're pretending to be the perfect family. I arrived 15 minutes early, hoping to avoid the usual comments about my 10-year-old Honda Civic parked between Ethan's Tesla and Lauren's Mercedes. Miranda's here, Mother announced to the room, her tone suggesting I was more of an interruption than a daughter. Try not to break anything valuable. The extended family was already gathered. Aunt Victoria with her judge husband Uncle Kenneth with his tech startup millions, and various cousins who'd all managed to become doctors, lawyers, or marry into wealth. I took my usual seat at the far end of the table, what Ethan jokingly calls the kids' table. Even though I haven't been a kid for over a decade, dinner began with Father's traditional toast about family achievements. This year, we celebrate Ethan's promotion to senior vice president. He beamed, raising his glass of wine that cost more than my monthly rent. And Lauren's engagement to James Wellington III. The Sterling legacy continues to grow stronger. He paused, his eyes scanning the table, deliberately skipping over me like I was an empty chair. You know, he continued, swirling his wine, raising children is like managing a portfolio. Some investments pay incredible dividends. He gestured to Ethan and Lauren. Others, his gaze finally landed on me. Well, you hope they'll at least break even. The table chuckled politely. I stabbed my fork into my turkey, trying to disappear into my chair. But Mother wasn't finished. Robert's being too kind, she said, her surgical precision extending to her words. The truth is, some kids make you proud. Others just take up space. The polite chuckles turned into actual laughter. Ethan raised his glass in mock salute. To the participation trophy child, he said, winking at me. At least she's consistent. Lauren leaned forward, her 4-carat engagement ring catching the light. Miranda, you could still marry well. I know James has a cousin who's between careers. You two might have something in common. More laughter. I looked around the table at these people who shared my blood but had never shared my values. Aunt Victoria was whispering to her husband, probably sharing the latest gossip about my failures. Uncle Kenneth was already typing on his phone, probably posting about family dinner while ignoring the cruelty happening right in front of him. I help 20 veterans find housing every month, I said quietly, but my voice was drowned out by their amusement. After dinner, while helping clear plates despite being told the help would handle it, I overheard Mother in the kitchen with Aunt Victoria. "We've stopped mentioning Miranda to our friends," she said. "It's easier to just say we have 2 children. Less questions that way." "But what do you do about the photos?" Aunt Victoria asked. "Already handled," Mother replied. "I redecorated the living room last month. Amazing how much better it looks without certain reminders." I walked to the living room and saw she was right. The family photo wall that once displayed my childhood achievements, my high school graduation, my college acceptance letter, all of it was gone. In their place were larger photos of Ethan and Lauren, their accomplishments framed in gold, while my existence had been literally erased from the walls. 3 months after that horrible Thanksgiving, our family received news that Grandfather William had passed away. He was 92 sharp until the end, and the only family member who ever saw me as more than a disappointment. While my parents and siblings saw dollar signs at the mention of his will, I just felt the loss of the one person who'd ever told me I was enough. The will reading was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon at the law offices of Henderson and Associates. The building was one of those Manhattan skyscrapers that screamed old money, all marble and mahogany, with portraits of long-dead partners watching from the walls. Our family arrived in separate cars, but you could feel the anticipation radiating from my parents and siblings like heat from a furnace. "Remember," Father said to Ethan as we entered the conference room, "Grandfather always favored the successful grandchildren. That company stock should set you up for life." Mother adjusted Lauren's hair with practiced precision. "And the jewelry collection will look perfect with your wedding dress, darling." Nobody spoke to me. I was just there because the lawyers insisted all direct descendants attend. Mr. Henderson, a man who looked like he'd been practicing law since the Constitution was written, cleared his throat and began reading. The first few bequests were expected: the house in the Hamptons, to my parents various bonds and investments split between family members, personal items distributed according to relationships. Now, Mr. Henderson paused, adjusting his reading glasses. "We come to the matter of Mr. Sterling's controlling shares in Titan Technologies." Father leaned forward. This was what he'd been waiting for. Grandfather's tech company shares were worth approximately $50 million, and everyone knew they'd go to the worthy grandchildren. "To my grandson Ethan Sterling, I leave my vintage watch collection valued at approximately $10,000. Ethan's face fell. Father's jaw clenched. "To my granddaughter Lauren Sterling, I leave my library of first edition books valued at approximately $15,000. Lauren's perfectly manicured nails dug into her palms. "And to my granddaughter Miranda Sterling," Mr. Henderson continued, a slight smile playing at his lips, "I leave all my shares in Titan Technologies with the express instruction that she is to have full control, and that these shares may not be sold, transferred, or managed by any other family member." The room exploded. Father jumped from his chair so fast it toppled backward. "This is insane. There must be a mistake." Mother's surgical calm shattered. "Miranda is irresponsible. She can't handle this kind of wealth. We need to contest this immediately." Ethan pointed an accusing finger at me. "She manipulated him. Grandfather wasn't in his right mind. She probably convinced him when he was vulnerable." Lauren's mask of composure cracked, revealing the ugliness beneath. "She doesn't deserve this. I'm the one following in grandmother's medical footsteps. I'm the one getting married. This should be mine." I sat frozen, unable to process what I'd just heard. Mr. Henderson raised his hand for silence and produced a sealed envelope. Mr. Sterling anticipated this reaction. He left a letter to be read in the event of any contestation. He opened the envelope and began reading in grandfather's words. "If you're hearing this, it means my family is showing their true colors. Let me be clear. I am of sound mind and body as I write this. Miranda is the only grandchild who ever visited me without an agenda. While Ethan and Lauren came only when they needed money or connections, Miranda came every Sunday just to play chess and listen to my stories. She never asked for a penny." The letter continued. "I've watched Robert and Catherine systematically destroy their youngest daughter's confidence while propping up 2 children who inherited their greed, but not their work ethic. Miranda works harder in one day at her nonprofit than Ethan does in a month shuffling other people's money. She has more compassion in her little finger than Lauren has in her entire body. Furthermore, Mr. Henderson read on, I have been keeping detailed records of every interaction, every visit, every conversation. I have documented evidence of Ethan trying to convince me to change my will in his favor, including offers to put me in a better facility if I complied. I have recordings of Lauren suggesting I wasn't mentally competent enough to manage my own affairs. And I have years of letters from Miranda never asking for anything except my health and happiness. Mother's face had gone from red to white. This is a vendetta. He's punishing us through her. No, Mr. Henderson said, producing another document. This is justice. Mr. Sterling also left instructions that any family member who contests this will forfeit their entire inheritance, which would then be donated to Miranda's nonprofit organization. Father grabbed the document, scanning it with the desperation of a drowning man looking for a life raft. We'll prove she's incompetent. She can't manage this kind of responsibility. We'll get power of attorney. Gee, I wouldn't recommend that course of action, Mr. Henderson said calmly. Mr. Sterling has already established a trust with very specific protective provisions. Any attempt to declare Miranda incompetent or to gain control of her assets will trigger an immediate investigation into what Mr. Sterling called the family's financial irregularities. I believe he was quite thorough in his documentation. The threat hung in the air like a sword. Father knew exactly what irregularities grandfather meant. Mother's face suggested she did too. The 2 weeks following the will reading revealed just how deep my family's cruelty ran. What started as anger over the inheritance morphed into a calculated campaign to destroy me. They couldn't accept that grandfather had chosen the worthless child, so they decided to prove he'd made a mistake by any means necessary. It began with father hiring a private investigator. I noticed the same silver sedan following me to work, parking across from my apartment, trailing me to the grocery store. When I confronted the driver, he handed me his card with a smirk. Your father wants to make sure you're mentally stable enough to handle your inheritance. I'm just documenting your daily activities for the court. But documentation wasn't all they had planned. Strange things started happening at my nonprofit. Suddenly, we were receiving anonymous complaints about financial mismanagement. The board called an emergency meeting where they presented concerns that I was exhibiting erratic behavior and making questionable decisions. The complaints were oddly specific, mentioning conversations I'd only had with family members. Miranda. My supervisor Janet pulled me aside after the meeting. These complaints all came from the same IP address. Someone is trying to discredit you. Meanwhile, Ethan was busy spreading poison through his network. 3 major donors called to withdraw their support, each citing concerns about my mental stability and family situation. When I pressed the last donor for details, he admitted, "Your brother took me to lunch. He said you're going through a mental breakdown and that the nonprofit would be better off with new leadership." Lauren's approach was more insidious. She started showing up at my apartment building, talking to neighbors with feigned concern. "I'm just so worried about my sister," I heard her telling Mrs. Chen from next door. "She's been acting strange lately. If you notice anything unusual, please let me know. We're trying to get her help." The help arrived the following Tuesday. I opened my door to find my parents standing with 2 men in white uniforms and a woman holding a clipboard. "Miranda, dear," Mother said with a smile that never reached her eyes. "These nice people are here to evaluate you. We're all concerned about your mental state." Concerned enough to try to have me committed, I asked, not moving from my doorway. Father stepped forward. "You're clearly overwhelmed. Taking on grandfather's estate when you can't even manage your own life. We're doing this for your own good." The woman with the clipboard introduced herself as Dr. Patricia Haynes. "Your family has filed a petition for psychiatric evaluation. They've documented several concerning incidents." "What incidents?" I demanded. Dr. Haynes flipped through her papers. "Paranoid delusions about being followed, aggressive behavior toward family members, inability to maintain stable employment, I work at the same nonprofit I've been at for 5 years. A job your family says you're about to lose due to erratic behavior, she countered. I realized then how thoroughly they'd planned this. Every move I'd made to defend myself had been twisted into evidence of instability. But as Dr. Haynes spoke, I noticed something odd. She kept glancing nervously at my parents as if seeking approval. "How much are they paying you?" I asked bluntly. Her professional mask slipped for just a second. "I don't know what you mean. Is it a flat fee or do you get a bonus if you declare me incompetent?" Father's face flushed. How dare you question a medical professional's integrity? But I'd hit a nerve. Dr. Haynes quickly packed up her clipboard. "I'll need to review the documentation further," she said, hurrying away with her attendants. That evening I discovered just how long this had been planned. While searching for important documents in my apartment, I found something that made my blood run cold, a tiny camera hidden in my smoke detector. Then another in my living room lamp, and another in my bathroom vent. I called the police immediately. The officer who responded looked uncomfortable when he saw the devices. "These are professional grade," he said. "Expensive. You know who might have installed them." I knew exactly who, but proving it was another matter. The next day, things escalated. An envelope was slipped under my door containing photos of me in my apartment photos that could only have been taken from those hidden cameras. The accompanying note read, "You seem stressed. Maybe you should take a rest at a nice facility. We've already picked one out for you." But the worst betrayal came from someone I trusted. My best friend Sophia called asking to meet for coffee. She looked terrible dark circles under her eyes, hands shaking as she held her cup. "I have to tell you something," she said, unable to meet my gaze. "Your parents came to my house. They offered me $50,000 to sign an affidavit saying you've been showing signs of mental illness. They had examples all typed up of things you supposedly said and did." My heart sank. "What did you tell them?" "I told them to go to hell," she said, finally looking at me. "But Miranda, they knew things. Private things I'd only told you. They said if I didn't cooperate, they'd make sure I lost my teaching license. They had photos of me from college at parties, threatened to send them to the school board with stories about drug use. None of that was true. You barely drank in college." "I know, but they said it didn't matter what was true, only what people believed. And with their money and connections..." She started crying. "I'm so scared, Miranda. What kind of family does this..." Over the next week, I learned the full extent of their manipulation. My ex-boyfriend called to apologize, admitting my parents had contacted him months ago, warning him I was mentally fragile, and that staying with me would ruin his future. My college advisor finally returned my calls from years ago, explaining my parents had met with him privately to discuss my limitations and suggest I drop out for my own good. Even my rejection letters from the universities I'd applied to started making sense. Ethan let it slip during one of his threatening phone calls. "You really thought Columbia would accept you? I was already there, Miranda. All it took was a word to the admissions committee about my unstable sister, and your application went straight to the reject pile." The pattern was clear and horrifying. This wasn't just about the inheritance. My family had been systematically sabotaging me for years, creating the very failure they mocked me for. Every opportunity, lost every relationship, ruined every dream, crushed. It had all been orchestrated by the people who were supposed to love me most. As if the revelations about my family's past sabotage weren't devastating enough, the present-day schemes grew darker and more desperate. What I discovered next made me realize I'd been living in a house of horrors disguised as a home. It started when Aunt Grace, my father's sister, who'd always shown me kindness, called asking to meet secretly at a small cafe downtown. She arrived looking haggard, constantly checking over her shoulder. "I couldn't stay quiet anymore," she said, gripping my hands across the table. "Miranda, you need to know what they're planning. I was at your parents' house last week, and I overheard them with their lawyer. They're not just trying to prove you're incompetent. They're manufacturing evidence." She pulled out her phone and played a recording she'd made. I heard my father's voice clearly. "We need documentation of her taking medication. Can't Dr. Morrison adjust her records to show a history of antipsychotic prescriptions?" A male voice responded. For the right price, records can reflect whatever you need them to, but we'll need something more concrete. Has she exhibited any behavior we can use? Then my mother. We've been adding small doses of ketamine to her drinks during family dinners. Not enough to cause serious harm, just enough to make her seem disoriented. We have video footage of her stumbling, slurring words. Out of context, it's quite convincing. I felt sick. All those family dinners where I'd felt strangely dizzy, where my siblings mocked me for being a lightweight who couldn't handle one glass of wine. They'd been drugging me. Aunt Grace wasn't finished. There's more. They've been meeting with various doctors, shopping for one who will declare you incompetent without actually examining you. They found one Dr. Richard Klein. He's already written a preliminary diagnosis based on their observations. Why are you telling me this? I asked, though I was grateful beyond words. Because what they're doing is evil, she said, tears in her eyes. And because they threatened me too. Said if I didn't support their petition, they'd reveal that my son Jeremy is adopted. We've never told him wanted to wait until he was older. But they have the sealed records somehow. The corruption ran deep, but it was about to get deeper. That afternoon, the private investigator who'd been following me approached me outside my office. But this time his demeanor was different. "Ms. Sterling," he said quietly, "I think we need to talk. Your family hired me to find dirt on you, but what I've found instead is dirt on them." We went to a public park where he handed me a thick folder. "I have a conscience," he said. "What's in here should help you." The folder contained photos, financial records, and transcripts that painted a picture of a family built on lies and crimes. There were pictures of my father meeting with known insider traders, documents showing suspicious transfers from client accounts, evidence of my mother taking kickbacks from pharmaceutical companies to promote unnecessary procedures. But the most shocking revelations concerned my siblings. Ethan, the golden boy of Goldman Sachs, was skimming from client accounts to fund a serious cocaine addiction. The investigator had photos of him at his dealer's house, records of the fraudulent transfers, even a video of him at a party bragging about how easy it was to steal from stupid clients who trusted him with their retirements. Lauren's secrets were equally damning. The perfect daughter engaged to political royalty was having an affair with her fiancé's father. But it wasn't just infidelity. She was blackmailing the older Wellington with photos threatening to destroy his political career unless he funded her lifestyle. The investigator had copies of the blackmail messages, the demanded payments, even recordings of their encounters that Lauren was using as leverage. "Your family hired me to investigate you," the investigator said, "but they should have been more careful about their own secrets. I'm giving this to you because what they're trying to do using the mental health system to steal your inheritance, it's unconscionable. Do what you need to do." Armed with this information, I began my own investigation. What I found in old family documents was the final piece of the puzzle. Buried in my grandmother's letters, I discovered references to family money that had disappeared, an inheritance meant for all grandchildren equally that had somehow only made it to Ethan and Lauren's trust funds. Further digging revealed my parents had forged my signature on documents when I turned 18, signing away my rights to money I never knew existed. The depth of betrayal was staggering. This wasn't just favoritism or disappointment in a child who chose a different path. This was systematic theft, fraud, and abuse spanning decades. They hadn't just stolen my inheritance. They'd stolen my entire life, one opportunity at a time. A meeting with grandfather's lawyers revealed he'd known more than he'd let on. Mr. Henderson showed me a separate file grandfather had compiled. "He hired his own investigators years ago," the lawyer explained. "He suspected your parents were mistreating you, but he needed proof." What he found disturbed him so much that he restructured his entire estate plan. The file contained reports of my parents telling my teachers I had learning disabilities to explain why I might struggle, when in reality they were ensuring I'd receive less attention and fewer opportunities. There were records of them declining scholarships on my behalf without telling me, claiming I was pursuing other options. There was even evidence they'd intercepted acceptance letters from universities responding with rejections in my name. "Your grandfather wanted to give you what they'd stolen," Mr. Henderson said. Not just money, but the chance to prove who you really are without their sabotage. But my family wasn't done yet. The next phase of their plan was even more sinister. I started receiving calls from reporters asking about my mental health struggles and my inappropriate relationship with my grandfather. The stories they were spinning were sick, suggesting I'd manipulated a senile old man, that there were questions about the nature of their relationship. When I confronted my parents about these disgusting insinuations, my mother smiled coldly. It's amazing what people will believe when they want to. A young woman spending so much time with a wealthy elderly man, people draw their own conclusions. You're suggesting I had an inappropriate relationship with my own grandfather. I couldn't believe the words coming out of my mouth. We're not suggesting anything, Father said smoothly. We're just concerned that others might misinterpret your closeness. Of course, if you were to sign over the shares to more appropriate family members, we could make sure these nasty rumors disappear. It was blackmail, pure and simple. They were willing to destroy my reputation to suggest the most vile things, all for money they felt entitled to. The morning I decided to fight back, I woke up to find my car tires slashed and a note on my windshield. This is just the beginning. Sign over the shares. But instead of fear, I felt a cold clarity wash over me. My family had made a critical mistake. They'd pushed me so far into a corner that I had nothing left to lose. My first move was hiring Margaret Chen, a forensic accountant with a reputation for uncovering financial crimes that others missed. When I showed her the evidence I'd gathered, her eyes lit up like a hunter who'd spotted big game. Your father's insider trading alone could put him away for 20 years, she said, flipping through the documents. But this pattern of embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering, this is RICO territory. Your family isn't just corrupt. They're running a criminal enterprise. While Margaret dug into the finances, I hired my own team of lawyers led by David Kim, a former prosecutor who specialized in elder abuse and financial exploitation cases. His assessment was blunt. Your grandfather was brilliant. Every provision in his will, every safeguard he put in place, it's like he was playing chess while your family was playing checkers. He knew they'd try this and he prepared for it. We began building our case methodically. Margaret discovered that Father had been using Ethan as a conduit for insider trading for years, splitting the profits while using his son's position to avoid detection. The amounts were staggering, over $30 million in illegal gains hidden in offshore accounts. Mother's crimes were equally serious. She'd been taking kickbacks from pharmaceutical companies to push unnecessary cardiac procedures on patients, particularly elderly ones with good insurance. Margaret found payments totaling over $5 million, disguised as consulting fees and speaking engagements, that never happened. But the real breakthrough came when we subpoenaed family financial records. Hidden among legitimate transactions, we found evidence that my parents had been stealing from grandfather's estate for years before his death, using their power of attorney to funnel money into their own accounts. They'd been so careful to hide it from him, but not careful enough to hide it from a forensic accountant who knew where to look. Armed with this evidence, David arranged a meeting with the district attorney's office. What was supposed to be a quiet family dispute was about to become a criminal investigation. Meanwhile, I'd been secretly recording every interaction with my family. State law allowed single-party consent for recordings, and I intended to use every word against them. The most damning recording came from a family meeting my parents called to settle this matter once and for all. They'd gathered the whole clan at their estate, thinking numbers would intimidate me. But I arrived with a recording device in my purse and a steely determination to let them hang themselves with their own words. Let's be reasonable. Father began playing the patriarch. Miranda, you know you're not equipped to handle this responsibility. Sign over the shares and we'll make sure you're taken care of. We'll even increase your monthly allowance. I don't receive an allowance, I said calmly. I haven't taken money from you since college. Because you're too proud, Mother interjected. Always trying to prove something. Well, you've made your point. Now it's time to be practical. Ethan, high on cocaine and arrogance, couldn't resist showing his true colors. Look, sis, we all know grandfather lost his mind at the end. The only reason he left you anything was to spite the rest of us. You're not a businesswoman. You're barely functional. Just sign the papers and go back to your little charity job. Is that what you told your clients before you stole their money? I asked quietly. The room went silent. Ethan's face went white, then red. What are you talking about? I know about the cocaine, Ethan. I know about the embezzlement. I know about all of it. Father stood up, his face thunderous. How dare you make accusations against your brother? They're not accusations if they're facts, I said. Just like it's a fact that you've been insider trading using Ethan's position. Just like it's a fact that Mother has been taking bribes from pharmaceutical companies. Just like it's a fact that you've all been stealing from Grandfather's estate for years. Lauren laughed a harsh sound. You can't prove any of that. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Actually, I can. In fact, I already have. The district attorney found my evidence very interesting. They'll be in touch soon. The family meeting devolved into chaos. Accusations flew, threats were made, and through it all, my recorder captured every incriminating word. When Uncle Kenneth tried to physically intimidate me, grabbing my arm and demanding I stop this nonsense, I calmly informed him that assault would be added to the list of charges. But my family's desperation reached new heights when they tried to bribe Judge Patricia Hendricks, who was overseeing the competency hearing they'd initiated. What they didn't know was that Judge Hendricks had already been briefed by the DA's office about the ongoing investigation. She recorded every word of their bribery attempt and immediately reported it to the authorities. The competency hearing became a disaster for my family. David Kim systematically destroyed every piece of evidence they'd manufactured. Dr. Klein, their bought and paid for psychiatrist, crumbled under cross-examination, admitting he'd never actually examined me and had based his diagnosis entirely on my parents' descriptions. When we presented evidence that I'd been drugged during family dinners, Judge Hendricks was visibly disgusted. In 30 years on the bench, I've rarely seen such a calculated attempt to abuse the legal system, she said. Not only is Ms. Miranda Sterling clearly competent, but the evidence suggests she's the only member of this family showing good judgment. But the real shock came when we played Grandfather's video testimony. He'd recorded it months before his death, sitting in his study looking directly into the camera with clear, intelligent eyes. If you're watching this, Grandfather said, it means my family has tried to steal Miranda's inheritance. Let me be clear, I am of sound mind. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Miranda is the only one of my grandchildren who inherited my values along with my blood. While the others inherited their parents' greed and cruelty, she somehow emerged with kindness and integrity intact. He continued, I've watched Robert and Catherine systematically destroy their youngest daughter while propping up 2 children who will likely follow them to prison. Yes, I know about the crimes. I've known for years. I stayed silent because I was gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment. Miranda, my dear, that moment is now. Use what I've left you not just to build your own life, but to stop them from hurting anyone else. The video went on to detail specific crimes he'd discovered, matching much of what our investigation had found. By the time it finished, my family looked like they'd seen a ghost. In a way, they had. Grandfather had reached from beyond the grave to destroy the house of cards they'd built on lies and crime. The FBI raid on Father's office happened on a Tuesday morning, timed for maximum impact. I wasn't there, but his secretary called me voice shaking to describe federal agents carrying out boxes of documents while Father was led away in handcuffs. The photo made the front page of the Financial Times. Sterling investment executive arrested in insider trading probe. Mother's arrest came 2 days later at the hospital. They waited until she finished a surgery, showing more courtesy than she'd ever shown me. The charges were extensive healthcare fraud kickbacks and performing unnecessary procedures for profit. The medical board suspended her license immediately pending investigation. Ethan tried to run. He made it as far as JFK Airport before authorities caught him attempting to board a flight to a non-extradition country. The cocaine in his carry-on didn't help his case. Goldman Sachs fired him within hours, issuing a statement about their zero tolerance for financial misconduct. The clients he'd stolen from were already lining up lawsuits. Lauren's downfall was perhaps the most dramatic. The Wellingtons, faced with evidence of her blackmail scheme, held a press conference denouncing her and supporting the prosecution. Her fiancé, James Wellington III, revealed that he'd been cooperating with authorities for weeks, wearing a wire to gather evidence. The wedding was off, the engagement ring returned, and Lauren's dreams of political high society shattered like the champagne flutes at her canceled bridal shower. The extended family scattered like roaches when the lights came on. Aunt Victoria suddenly remembered a long-planned trip to Europe. Uncle Kenneth discovered urgent business in Asia. The cousins who'd laughed at me during that Thanksgiving dinner were notably silent, their social media accounts scrubbed of any family photos. But the true extent of my vindication came during the asset forfeiture proceedings. The government seized father's accounts, mother's properties, and Ethan's toys. The house I'd been mocked in, the cars I'd been compared to, the jewelry that had been flaunted in my face, all of it was gone. The Sterling family empire, built on crime and cruelty, crumbled in a matter of weeks. I attended one day of father's trial, needing to see him in the defendant's chair. He looked smaller somehow, his expensive suit replaced by a county jumpsuit. When our eyes met, I expected to see hatred or rage. Instead, I saw something worse, the dawning realization that the daughter he'd dismissed had been the one to bring him down. Mother's medical license revocation hearing was packed with former patients testifying about unnecessary procedures, about being pressured into surgeries they didn't need. One elderly woman broke down crying, describing how mother had convinced her she needed a heart valve replacement, putting her through months of painful recovery for a condition she never had. The board's decision was unanimous lifetime revocation and recommendation for criminal prosecution. Ethan's situation grew worse by the day. The cocaine addiction he'd hidden behind his golden boy facade was now public knowledge. Goldman Sachs conducted an internal audit and found he'd stolen over $2 million from client accounts. Former colleagues came forward with stories of his erratic behavior, his bragging about being untouchable because of his family name. He faced both federal charges and a mountain of civil lawsuits that would leave him bankrupt regardless of the criminal outcome. Lauren, stripped of her Wellington connection and medical school dreams, found herself truly alone for the first time. Stanford expelled her after learning about the blackmail scheme. Her carefully curated social media presence became a liability as former friends distanced themselves publicly. She went from socialite to social pariah in record time. During this chaos, something beautiful happened at my nonprofit. Donations poured in from unexpected sources. Former patients of mothers who'd learned the truth, clients Ethan had tried to steal from who'd been saved by the investigation, even some of grandfather's old business associates who'd stayed quiet out of fear, but now felt free to support his chosen heir. The board that had questioned me just weeks earlier now offered me the position of executive director. Miranda. Janet said during the meeting, "You've shown more strength and integrity in these past months than most people display in a lifetime. We'd be honored to have you lead this organization." I accepted, but with conditions. Using a portion of my inheritance, I established the William Sterling Foundation for Family Scapegoats, providing legal and psychological support for people whose families had systematically abused them. The irony of using grandfather's money to help victims of family abuse wasn't lost on anyone. The DA's office asked me to give a victim impact statement during the sentencing phase. I stood in that courtroom looking at my family in their jumpsuits and shackles and spoke from my heart. "You called me worthless, said I just took up space. You drugged me, sabotaged my education, stole my opportunities, and tried to steal my sanity. You did everything in your power to make me the failure you said I was. But here's what you never understood. Every obstacle you put in my path made me stronger. Every cruel word made me more determined to prove my worth through kindness. Every locked door made me better at finding windows. You tried to destroy me, but instead, you forged me into someone strong enough to stop you from hurting anyone else. Father got 15 years for insider trading and fraud. Mother got 12 for healthcare fraud and attempted murder for the drugging. Ethan got 10 for embezzlement and drug charges. Lauren got 5 for blackmail and extortion. The Sterling family legacy wasn't what they'd planned. The family homes were auctioned off to pay restitution to victims. I attended the auction of my childhood home, watching strangers bid on the place where I'd been told I was worthless. When the gavel fell, I felt a chapter closing. But I didn't bid. I had no desire to own a monument to misery. Aunt Grace, who'd risked everything to warn me, became a true aunt for the first time. We had lunch weekly, building the relationship my parents had tried to prevent. She told me stories about father as a child, how grandfather had worried even then about his cruel streak. "Your grandfather saw it early," she said. "He tried to correct it, but some people are just born broken. You were the miracle, Miranda. The one who somehow grew straight in a crooked family." 1 year later, I stood in my new home preparing for Thanksgiving dinner. Not the cold mansion where I'd been mocked, but a warm brownstone filled with chosen family and the aroma of genuine love. The dining table was set with mismatched plates collected from thrift stores, each with its own story, each more valuable to me than Mother's precious china ever was. My guests began arriving, and what a different gathering it was. Sophia, my best friend who'd stood by me despite my family's threats, came early to help cook. Janet from the nonprofit brought her famous cornbread. Aunt Grace arrived with her son Jeremy, who now knew he was adopted and loved just the same. Mr. Henderson, grandfather's lawyer who'd become a mentor, brought wine and wisdom. Even the private investigator who'd switched sides, Marcus, joined us with his family. As we gathered around the table, I thought about how different this was from that horrible Thanksgiving 2 years ago. These people hadn't come for my money or connections. They came because they'd seen me at my lowest and chose to stand beside me anyway. "Before we eat," I said, standing with my glass raised, "I want to share something." 2 years ago, my biological family told me I just took up space. They meant it as an insult, as a way to make me feel small and worthless. But they were accidentally right. I do take up space. I take up space in this world for every person who's been told they're not enough. I take up space for every family scapegoat who's been gaslit into believing they're crazy. I take up space for everyone who's been systematically torn down by the people who should have built them up. Sophia wiped away tears. Marcus nodded solemnly. Aunt Grace reached for my hand. I continued. The William Sterling Foundation has helped over 200 people escape abusive family situations this year. We've provided legal aid, therapy, safe housing, and most importantly, validation that their experiences are real. Every person we help takes up more space in this world, space they deserve, space they've earned by surviving. We'd transformed grandfather's tech company shares into something beautiful. The foundation operated out of what used to be my parents' mansion, the scene of so much cruelty, now a haven for healing. The room where I'd been mocked now hosted support groups. Father's study was a legal aid clinic. Mother's parlor had become a children's play area for families starting over. I received letters from my biological family recently. I shared. They're in prison, but apparently they've found time to write. Father demanded I use my inheritance to pay for his appeal. Mother wanted me to speak to the medical board on her behalf. Ethan begged for rehab money. Lauren asked if I could introduce her to new social connections. The table was silent, waiting. I sent each of them the same response: a brochure for our foundation's services, and a note saying we help all victims of family abuse, even those whose abusers are their own children. I haven't heard back. Laughter filled the room, not the cruel laughter of that long-ago Thanksgiving, but the warm, healing laughter of people who understood that sometimes the best response to cruelty is radical kindness. After dinner, we held our new tradition. Each person shared one way they'd taken up more space in the world that year. Janet had expanded the nonprofit to 3 new cities. Sophia had started teaching self-advocacy workshops. Marcus had left private investigation to become a social worker. Aunt Grace had begun volunteering with our foundation, helping other family members break free from toxic dynamics. As the evening wound down and guests began leaving, Mr. Henderson pulled me aside. "Your grandfather would be so proud," he said. "But I think he always knew you'd do something like this. He used to say you had a gift for turning poison into medicine." Later, alone in my study, I pulled out grandfather's last letter to me, the one Mr. Henderson had given me privately. I'd read it countless times, but tonight felt special. My dearest Miranda, if you're reading this, you've weathered the storm. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from them while I lived, but I've done my best to arm you for the battle after I'm gone. You may wonder why I didn't act sooner, why I let them hurt you for so long. The truth is, I was building a case, gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment. But more than that, I was watching you grow stronger. Every time they knocked you down, you got up with more grace. Every cruelty they showed you, answered with kindness. You became the woman you are not despite them, but because you chose to be everything they weren't. Use what I've left you to take up all the space you need. Fill this world with your light. Show other forgotten children that being different from your family isn't a failure, it's freedom. All my love, grandfather. I folded the letter and looked out my window at the city lights. Somewhere out there were other Mirandas, other scapegoats being told they were worthless. Other forgotten children taking up space in corners and shadows. But also out there was our foundation, our team, our ever-growing network of survivors turned thrivers. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Hi, I got your foundation's number from a friend. My family has been calling me crazy for years, but after seeing your story on the news, I think maybe I'm not. Can someone help me? I smiled and typed back. You're not crazy, you're not worthless, and yes, we can help. You deserve to take up all the space you need in this world. As I prepared for bed, I thought about space. My family had been wrong about so many things, but they'd been most wrong about this. There's no such thing as taking up too much space when you're filling it with purpose, with love, with the determination to make sure no one else suffers what you suffered. The Sterling family name, once synonymous with success and power, was now associated with crime and downfall. But the Sterling Foundation was building a new legacy, one measured not in money or connections, but in lives saved and families escaped. I'd taken my place in this world, and I was holding the door open for others to take theirs. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you've ever been told you're not enough by your own family, if you've been the scapegoat, the forgotten one, the different one, please remember that your worth isn't determined by their inability to see it. You deserve to take up space in this world, to chase your dreams, to build your chosen family. If my story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Like this video if you believe everyone deserves to be valued. Subscribe to hear more stories of triumph over family trauma. And please comment below with your own experiences. Let's build a community where no one has to face family abuse alone. Remember, the best revenge against those who tried to make you small is to live a big, beautiful, space-taking life. Stay strong, dear ones. Your worth was never up for debate.